And welcome to yet another episode of Let's Drone Out. Back now into February, so getting closer to the drone season. As usual, we're joined by some of our motley crew, such as Tony.
What's up?
Hello, Tony. We've also got Adam lurking somewhere.
Hi.
G'day, Adam. This week we've also got NJ Tech.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, welcome back, because you were on last week. And Jack's taken some time out to, I think, make his hair into antennas or something, I heard. Get a haircut or something, but who knows? But I'm sure he might be in the chat, actually. So if you head on over to the right-hand side of your window, you should be able to see a live chat, post some questions in, and hello to you all. So welcome, crew. How are you all doing?
Bonjour.
Well, right now, I'm really liking the idea that Jack's turning his hair into antennas. So if you're near enough to him, you can tune into his thought wavelengths.
I think he's trying to replace
The more
some
I think about
FPV
it, the
setup.
less I like that idea. Go on.
No, he's replacing some FPV antennas, I think, with just hair. It's
Yeah.
the new, and brain implants. I think that comes next, but who knows? You can ask him if he's in the chat room.
Yeah, weirdly, he is
Yeah.
in the chat, but he's not yet on the podcast.
I haven't actually gone into the chat room yet, but I will very shortly. So, yeah. So lots of exciting things have been popping up on different YouTube feeds and things this week. Everything from Tyrannus stuff to flying over in some weirs and things like that. NJ, I believe you've got your hot little hands on some items.
Yeah, I did. I got my hands on this little guy here, which is a kind of micro brushless called the Jumper X76S. So I did a little review on that, and yeah, I've been quite interested to see how the micro brushless stuff is going to work out. And yeah, as a 1S, it's not filling me with excitement, but it's been good fun, and I can see this is now going to be. I think this is really going to start to take off. I think 2S is probably the sweet spot, but yeah, I'm actually doing a custom build on a 2S at the minute. So yeah, it's something to do while the weather's terrible here in the UK with whatever it is, Storm Doris knocking on our southwest corner of the country at the minute. So there's not much outdoor flying going on for any of us right now.
But even at night, these things, all these small cameras, I've just been amazed. I mean, some are better than others, but some of these are really good for flying in car parks with very little light or streets and stuff. So that's where I think it extends the flying opportunities by the day.
Yeah, I think in many ways, and this is true of all these little micros that I've reviewed, I've probably got more night flight footage than I have daytime footage, because they just tend to do better under that iridescent light, indoors and floodlit outdoors than they do in the daytime, where you've got big dynamic light changing.
Yeah,
and it's an interesting thing, actually. I was kind of wondering if we're always trying to second guess what's going to get the big push in development next. It's flight controllers, motors, although it's more incremental with motors, those little sort of 5-10% changes in each revision. But what one thing really needs a push, perhaps, and I certainly think it's usually the weak spot on a lot of these little quadcopters, is that little CMOS camera. And the only company for me at the minute that are really pushing stuff with cameras is Runcam. They're actually taking things like the 1177 and doing great things with it. And Runcam makes some of the best cameras out there now in terms of the FPV feed. So I would love to see them, if anyone at Runcam was ever listening to us, I'd love to see them start developing some of these micro cameras, because certainly for us here in the UK, we're desperate for some good micro cameras with these low light nights.
The depressing thing
We're
is that
desperate
they
for
don't
some
even need to
stuff.
do any work. All of that, the huge number of cameras in mobile phones over the years means that there's been a massive amount of research and development into those sorts of cameras. People just need to spend a couple more quid when they're specifying the parts.
I think, when I first started flying FPV, the cameras themselves are much larger than what they are of the 1177s. So they are shrinking down anyway as the technology.
So no, we just need the product managers to look a little further.
Well, that's it, and that's the difference, isn't it? We just need someone to put it into the right form factor and actually get it to be a nice small product that we can that will fit into the budget, that's that works around the budgets that you're working towards with these tiny drones. So I think that has to happen. But I've definitely seen a marked
You work on a
improvement
budget?
oh, I'm sure they do. Well, certainly in terms of just getting everything to the point where it's very accessible for that higher quality stuff. But the CMOS cameras are getting better. I've seen some truly terrible small CMOS cameras, and more recently I've seen the light handling improved on those little cameras. So they are. It's slower, but I'd like to see that area develop quicker. That would be good.
Well, even to the actual transmitters now, they're coming as switchable between different output power ranges. So I suppose it's just interesting that everything is still shrinking down. And
yeah, I mean,
like you said,
I've got one coming, which is exactly that, and it's the same form factor as those tiny little cameras that we're used to seeing, but it's got a much better sensor on it. It's got the cloverleaf antenna, and it's got a DVR built into it as well, and it's 6.8 grams, which is just mad.
You see, you can now make a paper plane RC. I wonder how long it'll be before we can actually make an FPV transmitter small enough on a paper plane as well.
Yeah,
it is. But no, I think seeing the brushless. I mean, I've had quite a few of these brushed micro quads, but seeing that brushless in action the other day, and just seeing how the response would stay the same when you zip the throttle up, it does actually bounce up and down much more than what the brushed ones were doing. So it's a great little flyer you got.
Yeah,
is
it's good
it
fun.
too fast though? Is it too fast for the house, or is it still?
No, do you know what? On 1S, there were, and these are 10,000 kV motors, 1103 10,000 kV. I didn't really notice that there was a massive power improvement as such in terms of top throttle on 1S. I think on 2S this thing will really come to life. On 1S there wasn't a huge difference between, say, that and something like the QX95, which has the tiny brushed motors. But what you do notice is that its ability to change RPM is, it's instant as you get with brushless motors. So it's really the RPM handling in the RPM change. It can just do it so fast that in itself makes it a much more locked quadcopter and start to feel like it's bigger brothers. So I think on 2S you'll end up with something that will handle really, really well. And you can, you totally could fly it around your house. Absolutely. I mean, this one's got prop guards. As long as they got prop guards, then you can fly it around.
Stand a better chance, don't you?
Yeah. Otherwise, you'd be bumping into stuff a lot. But yeah, Jay. So what was in the news recently? I think you mentioned something to me earlier that sounded quite interesting.
There's a couple of things, but just before I move on, how much are those going for at the moment? Those small brushless ones?
I think when I checked, that one was around £60. But that one,
depending.
Yeah, £60, but it doesn't come with a battery. It doesn't come with anything actually. It's just literally the quad, props, and a prop guard. No manual.
No manual.
That wasn't the best one that I've tried yet. But I mean that's roughly where the price point seems to be on those little RTFs.
Yeah, well, it's such a crime that they're doing those things. Really, I think without manuals.
I love the link. Speaking of crime,
I had to try and get it. Well, what's the crime one that I was going to discuss first? Because flying these, technically, you might actually suffer the same consequences that someone did, a 37-year-old in Staffordshire, who has, as far as I know, been arrested. But it's more what they did with the arrest that I think is quite alarming. They took all of his flying aircraft. They took his computers and mobile phones and also any recording equipment, and basically told him he's not allowed to fly a drone until, I suppose, he's been released on bail, and they haven't actually released a name or anything because they are actually going through a few things. I mean, that's quite heavy-handed, really, for someone doing a drone flight. And I believe they found it not necessarily from witnessing the action taking place, but convicted based on what they uploaded. And that's probably why they got all the recording equipment.
So be careful, guys.
Well, take note. Yeah. The irony of that is, well, when I first heard the story, because it's about a week old, when I first heard it, I started searching YouTube, as one does. But with the birthplace of William Shakespeare, I think quite a few people have flown over the city trying to find his house and all sorts. So there's one that looks like an American tourist. I think somebody else apparently was also caught in the act, a Japanese tourist, but they didn't actually find him. What I heard on that one is they were following him on CCTV camera as well. So as a city, they're thinking it's probably not so congested, but it's still a city and the rules still apply. So be careful what you upload if you're on the web, really.
Right, and this is a police force local to that area that also operate drones themselves, right?
Yeah, it's Warwickshire Police actually have drones that they use, and they're looking to implement even more. So, I mean, there are quite a few across the Midland sort of region that are starting to employ drones in their police forces.
Do we know what their drones are, out of interest? Well, what they're flying?
Inspired.
I believe they used to be Inspires, yeah. Most of them are just Inspire based.
See, they look the most Terminator, so they do look quite threatening, don't they?
Well, they're right. They all can just put a blue light on top and then it's done.
Out of the box, let's face it, it's got a 360-degree camera, and it's probably the most useful. And yeah, it looks the most threatening. But
if you were
and that's they don't.
You wouldn't feel like it was a difficult thing to explain either. Like, you know how you're going to have to explain any sort of corporate spending you've made or stuff. You say, oh yeah, for a couple of £1,000, we got ourselves a view that we used to get for £100,000 an hour on the helicopter or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
it looks boss.
Save money.
They had some police force giving basically how they used them at the commercial UAV show last year, and there's quite a broad range that they use it for, not necessarily surveillance, but that's number one. But when people have committed suicide in the car, like a chemical suicide, they won't approach the car in person, so they can at least fly over and assess the area, see if there's anyone inside. You know, there's loads of uses for these things now. That
I think the coolest one I saw was
planning everyone else. Sorry,
I saw being used by the fire service, and they had thermal sensors on board, thermal camera. So they could actually look at the hot spots of the house before sending the crew in. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, see if safety first, really. But this is why regulation just catches up. This is why they won't be banned per se. But I guess it's going to bring it home that you can't be flying over their area, which is congested areas, I suppose. Which is the law anyway.
Well,
so
if you search for drones arrests in 2017. You also get man in San Francisco flying it too near a police helicopter. That seems to be inviting trouble. And a man arrested in China for flying it too close. They don't say exactly what too close is, to a passenger jet.
Yes, I think I saw that one. Is that the one at the airport when the plane's coming in?
I would say at an airport is definitely too close.
It doesn't even look real, does it? It's like, oh my God, is that real? What an idiot. Why did he do that?
Yeah.
Because he's an idiot.
He got a great shot, though. It looks like an airline ad.
So on the subject of the Inspire, you've got your hands on the Inspire too, haven't you, Adam? Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Thanks to the gang at First Person View and some money, in fairness. Then,
and a bunch of money, yeah. And has your experience been with that? What's changed?
So I would say that it just feels better. Like, it's difficult to define straight away, but the first and most important thing is just how much more responsive it is to the joysticks, and that's a great thing, because I hadn't really realized, but the Inspire is big and it does move around, but it's not immediate.
Oh, we lost Adam a bit.
Things have last couple of years.
I think China just stepped in. China stepped into silent Adam. We missed some of that, Adam.
Sorry. It's the downside of it is it's slightly bigger. Just a couple of centimeters all the way around, which means it doesn't fit into my beautiful backpack. And
that makes all the difference. A couple of centimeters.
Right.
The
£250 that fucking bag. Sorry, there I go.
Oh, sweary. This is future editor. Sweary time.
What did I say? Keep it clean.
Did you say that?
I didn't even swear.
Well, it's an unwritten rule.
The other thing I would say is the video. I don't yet have one of DJI's £250 as a minimum. What's the word for it? But the high-speed
Solid
memory
state
cards. Yeah. So everything I've
solid
shot
state?
so far has gone on a standard micro SD, and it still looks stunning. The 5.2K, which is widescreen variant, still at the same number of pixels.
Vertical pixels, right? Yeah.
Yeah, is spectacular.
Cinematic. I think.
What are you watching
is.
it on?
On a Retina MacBook.
But even if you downsample it, it'll look sharper again.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It doesn't matter if you're not looking at 5.2.
So basically, you can zoom in 5 times and it still get the 1080p.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But you see, when you're actually at the 1-to-1 ratio of the actual sensor, the sensor's not a massive sensor, so you would start to see some noise, but probably not much. I mean, this is some of their flagship stuff, isn't it?
Crop.
So
If you take both and you look at it at 4K or you crop it to 1080, you do see that it's clearly a better sensor. It copes better in dark areas and light areas
for much more money.
For much more money.
Yeah.
I should point out I'm flying the expensive one, but as an upgrade from the expensive, from the Pro as well. So I'm testing.
Is it scary every time you take off? Do you think like that is like $6,000 in the air now? I'm scared.
It sort of spoils it.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh my god.
I'm much less inclined to use it, which is sort of the way I've always thought about these things is, for sake of argument, your drone costs £1,000, right? Second time you fly it, both flights cost £500. Keep going, and you'll eventually get that down to an amount that's not too depressing.
Yeah.
With the Inspire, you start with a bigger number, and you're less likely to use it. So each flight stays terrifying. At the same time, it makes me really, really, really clumsy with the old one. And as my new friends from the London gang will know, that means that I might, for example, get distracted by a dog running out onto the field and then knock the camera off the bottom of the Inspire 1, which is not manufactured as well as you'd think. Once you've snapped the camera support gimbal, you think that's some pretty cheap metal. They could do better than that.
So just while we're in this area, what I was going to say was, Jay, you mentioned something about GoPro. So they have recalled the Karma, correct?
Yeah. I suppose it's
spoke about that
so
before
interesting.
Christmas, didn't
It's so interesting. Yeah. Well, the recall actually is it's now actually we recalled about 3 months ago, so I think November time.
Sorry. So the news is the relaunch.
This is the relaunch now. They've only just relaunched it, but I mean, aren't they already doomed with it? The problem they had a long time ago was the battery latch wouldn't make a good connection. So sometimes mid-flight, the battery would disconnect and it would fall from the sky. So they recalled all of them to hopefully fix that, to try and fix that.
So, and what you're saying is that's bad, right? If it falls from the sky.
Well, it doesn't have a big bouncy cushion underneath it, that's for sure. I mean, it was breaking them, but it was obviously not user fault. It was the actual product fault. So they recalled them all and now released it. But quite quietly, I think. I don't think they made a massive fanfare.
No, I think
available in the US.
It took the world, people like us, to point out that you can get them again. I think that their strategy appears to be just pretend it never happened last time.
Yeah,
exactly.
Which,
and
in fairness, would be exactly my approach to it.
I didn't find out how many units they sold originally, because they didn't actually say, I couldn't find it at least, how many units they had to recall. But that could have been quite embarrassing anyway, because let's look at, if you look at their competitors, they kind of were a bit too late. Yes, they have the GoPro camera, and yes, you can fit it on the stabilization, and there's uses for their system. But DJI, as we were speaking just a moment ago, are just constantly improving their sensors and their camera units, and they've put them into mobile handheld stabilization, onto Inspires, onto Phantoms. So
they win. They rock. DJI rock.
Well,
they're the best.
they've had enough product iterations.
Yeah.
And like someone was saying, if GoPro thought they'd get the dream unit from the first one out, the perfect one without any kinks or anything, they're living in dreamland. So
apparently, approximately 2,500 GoPro Karmas were recalled.
2,500 worldwide. That's not many then.
No, it's not really.
But then their recall came quite soon after they started selling. 2,500 £1,000 products is not an awful number.
But how much R&D have they put into it? There's probably a lot of costs that they've had. Even marketing alone would have had quite a lot of.
Yeah. You've got to think that they've lost the one Christmas that they could have hoped to.
And
now fighting the little DJI foldy thing means that they're never going to get that time again.
The Mavic is for everyone who wants to go on holiday and take it with them. It's perfect.
And GoPro would have got a huge chunk of that market. And now and GoPro is still a really strong brand amongst people who don't really know anything about drones. So they've got a chance of getting it back, but they're going to have to spend that much more to do it. Yeah. And every time someone looks at that GoPro, then they'll find themselves looking at an article, in the Guardian or whatever. They'll probably mention the Mavic as well. They'll never have that
GoPro
free run.
The risk. I mean, GoPro and their action cameras we've all known and loved. If you've ever been FPVing, even they're under threat from other, players in the market for the action cameras. So they run the risk of falling flat on their face and going under if they're not careful.
Well, no,
I don't think they'll ever go under.
You'd be surprised that companies can always go under.
Paid enough money to be fine.
But they may well need to wind up because, as you say, they don't. The GoPro used to command a huge cost.
It's still the best camera.
And the market. It was used still in broadcast for action cameras because so they had a massive portion of the market, but
now you can just as easily go to Sony.
Yeah, Sony. Garmin have their own. There's several coming out.
They're not nice shapes, are they?
Come on, the GoPro is not a pretty device.
Even to the point that you can get the similar shape in a Xiaomi that's even bright white.
Or Polaroid branded.
Yeah, but actually, Xiaomi have now just put their prices way up because everyone's put the script on, and made it.
But exactly,
didn't Sony make the sensor though? Didn't Sony make the sensor for one of the GoPros, if not a few of them? Because I think it's down to the sensor at the end of the day, and the GoPros have had fantastic sensors in them, and that's
actually
been one of the
sensor and the processor. They had the Umbrella A7, wasn't it, or something in the 4?
Umbrella?
Umbrella,
Umbrella. It's like Resident Evil.
Umbrella, mate. Yeah, no, it doesn't rain in Australia, no. But because that's what they're talking about when they're moving it beyond 4K, saying if you did 8K, but they need the processor to handle the writing to the card, to the actual color correction, all that sort of stuff has to go on. So it's not just the sensor; it's the architecture to write the file and process the file. Digital signal processing.
So sorry, just quickly before.
Are you going to say as well? I was going to say that the Karma. I did go and have a look at the Karma back at Photokina before the recall, and as a piece of product design, it was just nicer. It's still nicer than the Mavic. It was just felt more convincing in the hand, folding it out and opening it and closing it, and you could just pull out, and you got a handheld gimbal. Like the what's the other DJI thing? With DJI, I'll charge you another £300 for it. Came built in for free, in effect, with the Karma. Yeah. So the Karma's a whole movie kit. That
was the thing for me. It felt more like a sort of a more geared towards the adventurer that will go out and do lots of things and swap.
People who are already familiar with the GoPro brand, but not necessarily familiar with DJI.
But why
they may have a GoPro already.
Why do we think more people in our world, perhaps on the drone side of things and the FPV side, and why does it seem? I personally know more people that steered towards the Mavic as soon as that came out. So what do we think that
we know and trust DJI, and we've seen them get better.
And the size.
The size is very nice, but the size is comparable.
Well, it goes down to an old big SLR camera size. You know, that is what has been so appealing for everyone, I think.
Mm.
The Mavic does come in a very nice bag.
I would still buy a Mavic and then a handheld gimbal over a GoPro Karma.
Well, that's just hateful.
You can actually, you know, they are releasing just the GoPro airframe to buy. I think it's $399 US, so probably £400. And that's just the airframe, as in motors, flight controller, and maybe even a remote control or something. But yeah,
no gimbal.
But yeah, well, the gimbal is always the most appealing part for it. I don't know.
So let's just moving on. I think we got a question earlier which I forgot to answer. A few people were asking what that was. That's the Jumper X73S. For those that wanted to know what that little micro brushless indoor was. And heading back towards the FPV side of things. Whoops. Tony, what's been happening in the race scene? You said there was an event out in Florida.
There was the Sebring race, which was held for a few days, and I think another young guy won, a sponsored Lumineer pilot. I think his call sign is Mad Air, and he was quick, but our guys in the UK would have gone out there and got first, second, third, fourth.
Oh, really?
Seriously.
Bold statements. Did you see any footage from the race?
Everyone that was there.
It would have been like Ken, Banny, Whitfield, you know, all the top guys here would have whipped any of them. They were fast and smooth, but I don't know. There's something about being in the UK at the moment. I think it's because we have to go out in terrible conditions and fly in wind, rain, dreary weather.
It's the equivalent of athletes training at altitude, right? That's what you're saying. Yeah,
pretty much. I do believe if we'd have gone over there, if the lads, you know, the top 10 lads had gone over there, they would have cleaned up, basically. But it was a good event. It looks well organised.
Was there any kind of names that we'd recognise there other than?
I didn't. Johnny FPV was out there. You know, who's been on Rotor Rate, and he was talking about the soft mountings. If anyone's seen the stuff about soft mounting stuff,
that's a really interesting topic. What's been your experience with soft mounting?
Last weekend I flew with just me and my mate went out last weekend, GFPV.
And we're talking about soft mounting the motors specifically, just so.
It wasn't the motors. I was just soft mounting my flight controller.
Oh, the flight controller, okay.
Yeah, and I hastily repaired my quad. I put another lead on my board and quickly put it back together, went out, met him at the field, started flying, and we could both hear my quad sounded awful. He heard it. He said, "What's up with your quad? It sounds terrible." And I was like, I don't know. I was landing it, checking the motors for heat. You know, like, well, nothing's bent. The props are brand new. I don't know what can it be. Flew again. I had to change my FPV cam because I was having problems with it. Changed that, and then realised that my soft mountings were all off. So I redone all my soft mountings on the flight controller, and this is using an F4 board. Flew it again, and you could hear straight away after remounting the flight controller, no sound from the motors. It was started to fly great again. It was like when I didn't have it set up properly, it was locking in. It was like it felt like it had a delay. And I was stuck in a position for like a millisecond, and then like a turn, and I'd go, why is it not turning when I want it to turn? And then it would stuck in that position and then stuck. It was really, really weird. But after that, it was fine.
Well, isn't it really interesting? It's really interesting doing the soft mounting flight controllers and more recently the latest craze, which was soft mounting the motors themselves.
Yeah.
And it's really a case of resonance in the quadcopter, and any flying machine with rotating parts, you know, planes, helicopters, it doesn't matter. I mean, we can talk about commercial aircraft that are worth millions and millions and have, you know, billions of pounds spent on development. They've all got rotating parts. No matter how amazing and high tolerance the parts are, they have to be statically and dynamically balanced, so that they don't resonate at certain frequencies. And you know, we come back to our little quadcopters, and when you build those, and this goes for if I was to build 10 identical quadcopters in a row, every single one of those will have a slightly different resonance to it. It will have different frequencies. And even changing battery, you swap from a small battery to a large battery, you're changing the mass of the quad. That's going to affect how resonance is moving through the quad. In really bad cases, you get harmonic resonance, where those frequencies will be coupling together and amplifying. And I've actually seen that on a couple of builds before, where you'll be hovering the aircraft, and all of a sudden it will just sit there and start to build up into this really quite violent flutter. And that's an example of where it's harmonically resonating. You could change something as simple as changing the props could suddenly make that all better, because you've moved that point of resonance away, and it's cured. So and I think this also comes down to soft mounting the motors. You can have exactly the same thing. Soft mounting the motors themselves might not, it's sort of indirectly a solution. It might sort that problem out, because you've just changed those resonance points, and then all of a sudden you're like, there was the magic ticket. You might have arguably got to the same conclusion by changing the type of material you'd used to soft mount the flight controller.
Yeah.
And I've seen this time and time, and I've looked at the data. I've done this in black box logging, and on one of my videos I actually show a before and after screenshot of a brand new quad with balanced brand new motors. You know, it was a brand new build, and it was resonating horribly. And in flight, I took some black box logs of it, and you can see on all three axes it was just a mess, and it flew terribly, oscillated. And I experimented with different types of. I used silicone. Little silicone O-rings on the flight controller, and then I tried silicone on top and like a rubber O-ring underneath, and I found one where all of a sudden you had nice thin traces in the black box and everything was good as gold, and then lo and behold, it tuned up beautifully. I might have got the same thing by putting some soft mounting under the motors. The point is you got to that point where it was happy and balanced. And it's something you do have to experiment with, but it's not necessarily one thing or the other that's led you to find that sweet spot. The point is you shouldn't always assume it's down to the tune that causes the problem. There could be a resonance issue. So, you know, it's worth experimenting with. But yeah, like you said, you could build another one exactly like the one you had and not have the problem at all.
Yeah. I mean, a
scientist would tell you to control your experiment.
Exactly. Minimize the variables.
Yeah.
It was from my multi-wheel days that I've always tried to soft mount the flight controller. And I always thought that it's the sensors you want to stop having the vibration wherever it's coming from. And I think my philosophy was that as long as you try and start there and reduce it all sensors, then you're onto a winner. But it really came into effect similar to you, Tony, but mine was on KISS, and I'd made a repair, and it would fly and it would seem okay, but it would, after a couple of seconds being armed, it'd take off. So it was doing strange things that didn't feel right, and it was amazing that it's a purely vibration that came down to it. So
yeah, it was vibration. The worst thing was, like, you could hear it first. We could both hear the motors change pitch. You could hear the difference, and then also obviously I could feel the difference.
Do you know what? That's a really important point as well, Tony, which I always say to people that are trying to find a good tune, is I can quite often tell far more about what I hear than what I see. And especially a lot of the time, like you could be filming, you might want to look back at your footage to try and find the problem. And if you're recording at 30 frames per second, you might not spot some oscillation that you would see at 60 frames per second. But the one thing you can always use is your ear, and you can hear when a motor's unhappy. You can hear it, like it's almost like a chirping that lets you know that. Yeah, and when it lands, obviously you can check the temperature. That's another sign as well. But I think that's a really underrated part of getting a tune done well, is to have the quad close to you and listen to the motors.
Definitely.
There is a notable difference between smooth and unhappy.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it's interesting actually, because that was the other thing I was going to say is you kind of get a lot of the same. I mean, these all fall into the same arena of a bad tune. You've got your obviously the resonance issue. You've got the tune itself, and spotting when it's the tune and not the resonance. And then the other thing people try and dial out all the time, obviously, is prop wash. And I think there's a lot of misconception around what prop wash is and how to deal with it. And it's something that I'm actually going to call Jack out here, and I'm only going to do it because he's not here to defend himself.
He won't come on either.
but Jack's mentioned a few. I know. It was just something he said that I remember him.
All right.
He said that when he had prop wash at the top, when he was at top throttle, he said he'd sometimes notice having this prop wash problem at the when he was in a punch out. Of course, what you're dealing with there, that's oscillation at the top. That's not prop wash. What you're dealing with when we talk about prop wash, we're effectively talking about stalling the propeller, or
when it comes down into its own.
Yeah, it's coming down into its own wash. And if you think about what that is, it's falling into disturbed air, because a propeller is just a wing, and it has to obey the same laws of physics as every other wing out there, be it on a jetliner, be it on a helicopter. But our closest relative in terms of what a quadcopter is and its rotating propellers going downwards is a helicopter. And there's a big thing that helicopters, full-size helicopters, have to avoid, and that's called settling with power, or it's also called vortex ring state. And it's a condition where you have to avoid ending up falling into the air that you're pushing down. And there are certain scenarios where you'll end up in that kind of condition, and there's kind of three main situations you have to avoid, or three things coming together. And one of those is descending too fast and not moving with enough airspeed. So you end up essentially catching up with that disturbed air, because as soon as that propeller has taken in the clean air, what's disappearing beneath it is churned up and it's dirty, and the last thing you want to do is fall into that. Now, with a quadcopter, one of the easiest ways to actually experience prop wash, is when you change direction very, very fast. So if you're going in one direction, you immediately 180, and you basically then traveling backwards into air that is now coming the wrong way through the propeller.
Yeah.
And what you're essentially doing is your propellers are completely lost in all that disturbed air, and the propellers are trying to resettle the airflow. And while that's happening, you're getting this wobble. And that wobble is prop wash. And it's the same thing when you come out of a split S. You flip to 180, you come down, and then as soon as you come down, if you're not following a nice clean arc, if you just fall, you end up falling backwards into your own air, and the same thing happens. You end up in disturbed air, the props are trying to re-establish airflow, and you end up with that situation where you'll get this prop wash. And the easiest way to avoid it is just not to get into these situations of low forward speed or low airspeed, whatever direction you're going in, and a high rate of descent. If you avoid those two things, so if you're doing a split S, come out of it with a nice clean arc as you come round. And if you look at some of the best pilots out there, best freestylers, they will do that. But I tell you now, anyone that says my quad has no prop wash,
He's lying.
You're lying. You're breaking the laws of physics. It just doesn't work like that.
Are you saying also that something that would be a really bad idea, that would create its own kind of prop wash, would be to hang underneath your copter on a snowboard, because that snowboard would have its own lot of physics too.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. Casey Neistat, wasn't it? And
yeah, I watched his how-to video, this making of, if you like, video this week. I was saying before the show started, it annoyed me a great deal because he actually came across quite well, but he also had to cut out quite a lot because, of course, a snowboard does act as a propeller and spins around like no one's business, and I had a lot of trouble with that.
And when I looked at that video, that quadcopter, was it you were saying that he commissioned that build?
Decker, whatever, 16 prop. Yeah,
it was crazy. I mean, so do you know, was it a group that he
it was a marketing, they had a pile of money from Samsung, I think it was, to do something interesting on the internet.
I've built one from scratch to do that.
Yeah.
because it is.
And they did it in Lapland where there are no real rules or anything. Santa said it was fine. And,
They should have come to me. You could lift me with 2 Inspire.
Are you Santa?
It would have saved them loads of money.
No, actually, he's a lot lighter.
Yeah. Well, they had to strap him on using metal and a sort of bracy thing. You know, he wasn't just holding on his own weight. Because that was the thing. I was watching that going, well, I can't lift my own weight by one arm. Admittedly, I am fatter than that man. But still, I wouldn't want to be dangling by one hand. But he wasn't, apparently.
Yeah, he did.
I'd like to see that, though.
I did wonder that.
Let's start tinkering and see if we
Yeah,
can make
it did really make you think, let's build something massive.
What we did with
Let's have a go. I mean, it did look a lot of fun.
We should do that on LDO games next year. We've got.
Are you offering to be the person that?
I will get.
We have to be.
We
have to be careful though, because as Frank's telling us, people are now marketing shotgun cartridges with Skynet drone defense written on. So,
but it is still illegal to shoot down an aircraft or endanger an aircraft in the UK, regardless of what aircraft it is.
Yeah, in the UK, that's dodgy. In the US, it's probably fine.
No, in the US, it's the same as well. You cannot endanger an aircraft, which means you can't shoot one down or even shoot at it. So
really?
There's been, over the years in the UK, there's a lot of people that have said, I'm going to go get my shotgun, and it's always gone in the favor of the person flying. If it's a threat made against the aircraft.
Here, yes, but we have a large number of rational judges. The US has demonstrated itself to be a bit mad.
Okay, in recent years, maybe not lately, it might be a bit different, but let's keep the politics out of this 1 week alone.
Let me move us swiftly on. Tony, what's that you've got up on your shelf there? I've spotted
This is the new Revo, which has just been released yesterday or the 31st. Got released.
Marvelous. I want. So tell us what you've what's different about this design.
Basically,
the arms look the wrong way around.
The arms, yes. Look at the arms. They're not the standard arms, which would be that way. See the difference?
Absolutely.
So that depends which way you're holding it.
So this is the way I fly it, Adam.
Straight at whatever you're after. So I presume that's in an effort to get just low drag. If you
low drag, clean air. I mean, it's 15% more thrust on the calculations. I've seen battery improvements, whereas I can fly 30, 40 seconds longer with this.
Right. Wow. So you must have to run some crazy up tilt on the camera as well, then.
I'm at 45 at the moment, but I've got a wide angle lens to make it a little bit easier. I've just put a GoPro 3 lens in there.
As your racing setup, is that what? Just tell us what components you've put in that.
This one is a Revo board and F4 race flight.
The race flight, yeah.
Yeah, it's just got a 30 amp little bees on.
And the motors?
These are DYS 2205 2300 kV. Bradders has just built me another one with an F-Pack setup. I've got the 24,000 F40s on and the F30 ESCs on there. And
Tone, so all I do, generally speaking, I'm not a racer. I do it occasionally for a bit of fun, but it's not a big attraction for me. Now I know you race all the time. So how different does that feel compared to the quads that you have been flying in terms of accelerating from standstill and when it's up to speed? I mean, how is it in the corners?
The faster you go, the better it handles.
Right.
I was flying a track last Sunday, and I was like, we had this long banking left-hander through 3 gates, and I was coming up to it and like scary. It was like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And if I was flying slow, I didn't make it. The faster I went, the better it performed.
Right,
so
gotcha. And the The wire around the outside is just that is wire, isn't it? So it's like a brace. Or...
It's like a Teflon climbing rig.
Braided thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Like a 130-pound braking strain where you can tension it on the back of the quad to tighten it up. It basically holds it in the X shape. I mean, I crashed this, I don't know, 6-7 times, hard crashes.
How much did you swear after you crashed? Because that's how we know how much you've done.
I guess not at all if he's confident it's fine.
You know, I was just looking at it. Really confident with it, and it performed really well, and it flies good. And I'm looking forward to the Bradders build, who built me another one, which is even lighter than this one. I've got smaller. These are like the Mark 1 motor mounts. We've actually got rid of all of this. Is now missing on the new frame, which is being released. The carbon has gone up from 2.2 mil to 3 mil.
Okay,
so it's a little bit more durable, and it's there's just no drag. I mean, like
with the string around the edge, I wondered if that would be.
It plays a tune. You know you're going fast enough because it whistles.
Whistle, yeah.
As soon as it whistles, you know you're going fast. But you can see the aerodynamic.
Like a kettle boiling.
Well, when I was just looking on their page and looking from the top view, it looks like one of the micro brushed things because just there's these small little thin arms and like plates, but it does look impressive.
It's definitely out there, and it's definitely different.
I do know a crash tester or crash test dummy, I don't know, sometimes, who'd happily put one through their paces. I think he's known well, Mr.
We're hopefully going to send sending NJ Tech one soon, so you'll get one soon, NJ.
Wait, are you saying he's going to crash it a lot to test it?
Yeah. Oh no, I don't crash. It's a myth.
He doesn't. That guy can fly backwards. He flies backwards at LDO games. He was like, "I'm going backwards," and I was like, I have
NJ doesn't crash.
Take my goggles off.
NJ doesn't crash. The crowd rushes up to him.
Exactly. That's what they say, isn't it? Never fear crashing. The ground will rush up to catch you. It's mostly trees these days. I'm not a big ground hitter, but I do like occasionally hitting trees, and more recently the top of trees as well, which is quite worrying because I'm definitely not a climber. I always seem to manage to rope someone else.
That's my second job now, is getting quads out of trees. It's £50 a go. I travel anywhere in the country, and I have a big pole.
You've got the head for heights, though.
No, I just get my big pole.
He just likes saying he has a big pole on the as many media as possible.
Yes.
Do you get a discount if you don't eat meat?
You do. 0%.
Well, okay. I'll go back to being sponsored by the Curry House then.
50 quid is very reasonable if say the person with the drone is in Scotland. Or are you going to charge transport on top?
Very, very reasonable if they're in Scotland. 50 quid call out.
Yeah.
Nah.
No, this is like the third quad I've rescued. I rescued Adams twice from 2 different trees. So down at Hidden Valley, there's 2 trees named after Adam.
It doesn't mean me.
No, not that Adam. And we've got GFPV who stacked it in a tree in Dorking the other day. I went and rescued him. He's got out of a tree, but yeah, no, it's all good.
I've heard if you get one of the new Tyrannus radios, you don't actually crash into trees anymore because they're so.
Oh, is that going to cure it for me?
White one.
Have you got one? Do you know anyone who's got one then? I've not seen one. Have you seen one?
I might have seen one.
I saw one this morning.
I saw one online. Yeah, I haven't seen one.
It's quite concerning that I get these products now, and the first thing I do is grab a screwdriver and just pull them to pieces.
Let's have a look at this and see what it looks like in the inside.
But how does it tick? The Tyrannus QX7. It's I think it's brilliant for the price point. I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing so far. I think if the only kind of big complaint for me and it's not just this, it's the other Tyrannus X9D as well, it's the gimbals. And I've been spoiled over the years with having great radios with great gimbals, and my last set of Spectrum radios, that's one thing Spectrum will always always got right. The gimbals were beautiful, and that's your interaction with your aircraft.
That's the main bit.
That's the bit. So for me, both Tyrannuses are just wonderful at anything you can think of in terms of using the logical switches and setup, and anything you can think of you want it to happen, it will do it. There's a way to do it, but it's that interface bit that I just feel needs the improvement. So I'm hoping, what I've heard is the Hall sensors are coming out for the QX7. Obviously the M9 ones are out, which fit the Tyrannus X9D Plus and the Tyrannus X9D, but the plugs on those gimbals won't plug into the plugs on the X7. So they are bringing out. They will physically fit in, but they won't plug in. So those are coming out, and I've asked very specially that those get sent over as soon as they are, so that I can form an opinion on them. But that's something I will definitely want to do more or less straight away, and hopefully they'll just feel a bit more premium. Actually, I will ask Paul over at BMS Web, because I know he's just put the M9 sensors in his Tyrannus, so I'd be interested to know what the difference in feel between them are. It's hard to get them anywhere; they all sold out immediately. So obviously, it's something that people want. But yeah, but as a radio, it's great. It's £100 for us at the minute for the. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so 100 quid for the X7, and then the normal Tyrannus is what, too?
It's about 165 is about the street price for the normal Tyrannus. So
the ugly looking thing.
And not the easy there, Spectrum boy, and the M9 Hall, the Hall sensor gimbals are about £20 each. So that gets you in under the price of a regular Tyrannus to get the X7 with the Hall sensors. I mean, the other thing you lose from the X7 between the X7 and the X9D is you lose 2 switches that are on the top, and you lose the trim tabs that are on the side. But trim tabs, personally, I've only ever used those for fixed wing stuff, for changing the degrees of the flaps on a plane. But I don't know, does anyone in the quad world use those trim flaps? I don't think so.
No, I think
or anything like that.
It depends on what flight control. I know the gains we used on NASA stuff, DJI. That's the only time I've ever known anyone use those.
Oh, that's quite good.
It looks a lot better. I love the white, don't you think?
It feels great.
Yeah, it looks 10 times better.
Yeah, we really shouldn't include Jay on this conversation.
No, I'm sorry, but the thing that bugs me the most about the old Tyrannus is the little flower at the top for the speaker. I mean, did they go to...
Yeah, that's an appalling bit of design.
That alone, if they changed that, it would make it 10 times, twice as good.
BSM Web says the M7 gimbals make it a killer radio. So
there we go.
And Dazzle,
and to be honest,
Dazzle, I do cover Cornwall.
Are we not
£100
covering?
Is a reasonable cost. I might change.
£100 for that radio, and the amount of technology that's in there and what it can do in terms of its adaptability to kind of just about anything is, I think it's really, really very good value. For me, just as a seasoned RCer who's tried lots and lots of different radios, the gimbals, the feel of the gimbals, I just want better quality out of that. But that's an upgradable thing. Everything else about it, and the redesign of certain aspects, like the location of the trainer ports now on the top, so you're not sitting on top of connections if it's in your lap and you're using the simulator, for instance, on the computer. They've thought about lots of thought and redesign that's gone into that, and that kind of thing's really apparent when you take these apart a lot. You spot when designers have been lazy and just gone, that just chuck that on, or where they've just made the extra effort. It becomes very apparent, and I see a lot of really positive redesigns in that radio. And to get it out of that price point, it's very hard not to recommend that radio.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
BSM Web does say he really loves the flaps.
Oh,
they are trying to
Paul,
compete with
what do you use the flaps for then, Paul?
Well, maybe it's a good idea not to ask him what he does.
I don't know what he's implementing them for.
What was I going to say?
Is there any more chats?
Yeah, any more? Any more questions?
Well, there were two things. There's Frank was earlier pointing out that some Skywalker X8s were found with grenades on them in Mosul in
fabulous.
Iraq. That wasn't any of you, was it?
Oh,
Good
It was
lord.
NJ.
Good.
Payload test.
Yeah, quite a payload test. But you know, let's not get drawn down that.
No.
We've also been asked why none of the FR Sky TXs, or do you want to talk about drones being used to blow people up?
God.
not really.
No,
I think
We all know they can be used for good and bad.
I think we can have.
We all know that
hashtag-
humans in general have their problems. Not everyone's perfect.
Yeah.
Some people have some bad ideas.
I think we can
Some
put
people
that
have some
under,
very creative bad ideas.
hashtag ruining the hobby for sure.
Exactly.
They were all fixed wing, though. I believe the
Yeah,
attacks that they were using were all fixed wing aircraft.
Yeah. Well, they want range, obviously. FPV asks, why do none of the FR Sky TXs have dual antennas? Even the cheap Fly Sky does.
I've never seen any real range problems with by not going that route. I think it's really that kind of diversity thing, or this is why the cloveleaf antennas, the circular polarized antennas, are so popular putting them on the aircraft themselves and having the aircraft turn through various angles and going in and out of polarization. But there are radios that do it that maybe you don't know about. I know one of was it the DX9 had the two antennas in the actual radio itself. The Spectrum DX9 I think had it, and
it does.
It does,
it does.
There are a few that have it. Does the Horus have it? Because that had range issues, and I thought maybe that did have.
It had name issues as well.
But,
I don't like the name.
And I guess it's true for most of the situations we're talking about that people aren't going to be trying to reach 7-kilometer ranges or anything.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, you're more or less flying out in the area that you want to fly out in terms of, I'm going out that way. And in terms of projection and focus, then it's fine. The only time, if you really want to see where those dipole antennas will, fall over and not work as well, wherever that, if you bend your aerial at 90 degrees and you fly off to that side, so this is kind of the dead spot of the dipole antenna, that's where those will really fall over. So you're always, generally speaking, trying to fly out in front of yourself or keeping in
you, isn't it? It's like a donut stretching around you. If you've got your antenna,
yeah, absolutely. It's polarizing that way, depending on which way you have your antenna and which way you're pointing it, which is also why they say never point the antenna straight towards the quad. Again, you're putting that dead point out. It's radiating out in that donut shape, as Tony says, from perpendicular to the actual antenna itself. But there's lots of room for experimenting with that. Yeah, you could. I know some people who have put circular polarized antennas onto the radios themselves, or use a higher dBi antenna. That's the other thing. I've tried that using like a 5 dBi antenna or an 8 dBi. They all have different effects.
While we're following our chats,
very, very far, and it was fine with my Fry Sky.
Yeah, both Tyrannus have excellent range just on the standard.
Yeah, they're really good.
150 milliamps, I think they're.
How long does the battery last?
Milliwatts, sorry, 150 milliwatts. I haven't tested that yet. I don't know what the internal, but I was sent the 800 milliamp battery for that, and I run a 2000 milliamp battery in my X9D, so I'm expecting it not to run anywhere near as long. But I don't know how efficient the new one is versus the old one, so I will test that, and I'll try and get some information on that and let you know.
We're going to find out in part 2.
It's going to do a day's racing or day's flying, isn't it?
I would like to think so. I like the fact there's the option there to just run standard AA's in there, and you can buy, lithium ion AA's now that will last a very decent amount of time. So you could go that route, or look for a 2000 milliamp rechargeable pack. They're not a lot of money. Nickel metal hydride or a 2-cell LiPo. There's lots of options there, but yeah, in terms of its efficiency against the X9D, I'm not sure yet. That will take me a little bit of time to test, but I will report back when I know.
Hopefully later this week you might, hopefully fly it then, hopefully.
Well, this storm's now taking over, isn't it? It's just hit Cornwall, I think, and it's working its way towards us. So I think by...
Am I going to be able to work tomorrow?
The weather will do the work for you.
Well, I need to work. I need to go out there and glazing hygienist it up.
I think you're probably all right, actually. I think it's moving kind of northeast direction. So I think where you are, you might be okay. Don't quote me on that. I don't want to be doing my fish here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're probably about there, aren't we?
I think
yeah.
It's gone 9, but it seemed to go quite quickly tonight.
It did actually. You know what? Well, because we've had so much fun.
Absolutely, always.
No, but well, we're back again next week, aren't we? Is there anything else anyone wants to close with from you guys?
Apparently, the switches on the side can be used for arming the flaps. That's what.
Oh yeah, that's number one.
On
the top.
There we go.
So at least it's nice to round off anything, questions we've added open to anything. Sadly,
I don't trust made one flyers. That's the problem. Just don't trust.
I'm going to be at the Reading Flight Club talking drones and talking about my book to some real life people in real life next week. So I won't be here. So have fun.
Yes, enjoy that.
Well done, Adam.
Yeah.
Yay me.
Yeah. Well, a couple of weeks I'm running it out, and thanks to you, Tony, for coming along. We've missed you.
No worries. Fossilstuff.com, Revo 5, 4, and 6 are out now.
70 to 75 pounds or something, isn't it? So
yeah,
cool.
fossilstuff.com.
Yeah, just type Fossil Revo and you'll find it. I think that's how I found it.
Just Google it. You'll
Good to see you again, sir. I'll give you a call if I need some quads removed from trees, but the storm's coming, so not this week. Yeah. And to the NJ, who's...
Yeah, it might remove some trees instead.
Yeah, it might.
Be a bit easier.
Thanks to the NJ Tech, we look forward to seeing some new videos of all sorts of things that you're working on these days.
Yes, yeah. I'm slowly drowning under a pile of products, but I'm doing my best to get through everything. And yeah, it's all good fun. There are worse things to be doing right now while the weather's rubbish.
Exactly. But thanks to all our wonderful listeners who tune in every week.
And thanks to our sponsors, iDrone and fossilstuff.com and any of the Patreons who sponsor us to get this happening, to get the podcasts going out, which are finally going to start going out again. We are like 10 episodes behind, but we're going to start kicking out the door again.
We've only just recovered from our hangovers over Christmas, haven't we?
We have.
So, back
the
to the
podcast
in time for the new season.
Out soon.
Oh, and thanks to what's we got here in the corner? Thanks to iDrone.
Yep.
Yeah, iDrone.
Good friend,
like iDrone.
God bless him.
Yeah.
He sent me some props today, and my postman always, I must have had a different postman, just signs it for me and sticks them in my bin. And
don't say that. They might stop that sort of stuff.
I was there today, and it said, you need to go to your local post office to collect your props. And I was like, no. So, yeah, I must have had a different postman today because my postman is safe.
Violin.
Yeah, it's awful.
And then on that note, then, before Tony breaks down and
goes into a rage, give me my props.
Now I need to fly. But no, thanks to everyone for tuning in, and
cheers,
see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.
You've been listening to Let's Drone Out. Bye.